Ready.
I'm just letting everyone get to their seats, then we'll rock and roll. Okay, I'm ready. Steve, you ready?
You're live.
Thank you. Good evening. Today is Tuesday, October 5th, 2021. This is the Greenberg Central School District Board of Education's work session. Thank you for joining us this evening. It's 7:02 p.m. I'm going to call the meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is our Pledge of Allegiance. Can I ask everyone to please stand and pledge allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Ms. Kraus, do we have any statements from the public? No, we do not? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is policy review. And it looks like we had a few policies that were up for review here, one of which is 1110-E, Code of Ethics. I'm going to give everyone a chance to open that up. Are there any comments regarding this policy that's up for review? Is there any comments, questions? Okay. I'm not sure if there's any, what the next process is for this particular policy. I'm not sure if it was added by admin or legal. I see our district clerk, yes?
Well, that was added at the request of a board member. It was discussed last year, and it had been reviewed by legal because it was part of the Board of Education handbook that you created last year. So if the board wants to move forward, it can be presented at the October 19th board meeting for adoption at the November regular meeting.
Okay, so does the board want to move forward with the process? Is there anyone that objects to moving forward with the process?
I have no objections.
Okay, great. I hear no objections. Okay, so we'll move forward. Thank you for that clarification, Ivy. The next policy that's up for review is our public comment section policy. So I'm going to give everyone a minute to open that. And hopefully everyone's familiar with this. I specifically asked for this to be looked at. We do have a governance and policy committee, but I want to present this policy for possible review if the board is in agreement and nobody objects, because there are a few things that did come up more recently regarding this policy, one of which are written submissions to the board. I understand that by history we do not take written statements to be read at the board meetings. However, we may want to consider that. If we don't want that, I do think we should at least have a line in here being pretty clear that we don't want that, just so that this board for the rest of the year and any subsequent boards can have that pretty clearly specified. In addition, we had a lovely student come and speak at our last regular session, and I quickly realized that there is no reference in this public speaking policy about hearing from our students. Afterward, we were able to add a reference to policy number 3240 at the end of your policy. You'll notice that that's now referenced. If you go to 3240, it does say that any student can participate with written notice from their parent. However, the way that I understood this board was functioning is that we asked for the parent to be present. So I think we do need to clarify that in writing. I then heard from legal, who is here tonight, that could also clarify things that, in fact, the student does not need a parent in person or even written. Is that accurate, Carol? Correct. So I would like for the Governance and Policy Committee to actually look at this policy. It's also come up from other board members' inquiry about the amount of time that we allot public comments. I know in the past, board members also possibly wanted more than one public comment period. I've heard from community members requesting public comments are always in the beginning of the agenda before exec session, so maybe we could just really take some time to look at this policy and decide what we want to recommend and ultimately vote upon. Does anybody object to that? Hearing none, so then we'll start that process of looking at this policy and hopefully coming up with some recommendations to streamline it. The next policy up for review is 2210 committees. I don't know if anyone specifically asked for this to be reviewed. Was this the question that I had about the committee? Okay, so the reason why I asked for this is because we have a certain number of committees that we've bunched together, and I did hear feedback from people that possibly they would like to separate the Finance and Facilities Committee and the Finance Committee from the Facilities Committee. So that was one issue. How does the board feel? Do you want to look at this with regard to committees? The second issue with committees that one of the trustees brought up is whether or not we need to have permission from the full board to have the community be voted in as members of the CEC committee and of the Finance and Facilities Committee. So do you guys want to take a look at this policy and possibly amend it?
I'd definitely like to take a look at the policy associated with having the board, the committee actually be able to vote members in as opposed to having to come to the full board for that.
Does anyone have any feedback? I don't know, I'm turning to you, Trustee Warner, because you've been here the longest. Any feedback as to why that part of the policy was added in?
I will tell you that for years and years, that we didn't pay any attention to that portion of the policy. Whoever showed up at the committee meeting showed up at the committee meetings. There were very few actual votes for formal recommendations taken. Most of the items coming up to the board were framed as questions or requests, not recommendations, and therefore that was generally not an issue. So only in the past couple of years have we come back and started more stringently adhering to our own written rules and making sure that people could only become members if the board allowed them to. Now, in the case of something like the audit committee, you might not want to have the audit committee allow people to just add themselves to the committee in a committee meeting. I'm not sure if you want to make a distinction between what you do for a committee of the board versus a committee of the district. That might handle it.
So does anyone object to looking at this policy from the policy committee? Hearing none?
I have a question.
Yes?
So it says here that the Board of Education reserves the right to limit, create, or abolish any committees and/or subcommittees as it deems appropriate. So is the recommendation tonight to actually go back and separate out the finance and facilities, and are we supposed to vote on that, or?
I'm sorry for the miscommunication. So the recommendation is just to look at these policies.
Okay.
The policies will be reviewed by the Governance and Policy Committee, but I would like the support of the board to do that. I don't want to go digging into policies if the full board is not okay with that. Yes.
So I have a follow-up question. So who is actually going to make the recommend? Because we kind of push the two together in order to limit the number of committees, but then it's clear that the meetings, like the last meeting was a 3.5 hour meeting, so it's very long. And so, so who is eventually going to make this recommendation for the new sort of restructuring of the committees?
So the Policy and Governance Committee will make the recommendation and then send it, of course, to attorneys, to our administrators, and then it will come before the full board. So it may or may not get to that to that level.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
But if you or any other trustee who's not on the Governance and Policy Committee wants to share their views on these three policies or any other, please let us know. The chair of that committee is Mr. Pineda. Okay, let's move on, unless anyone has any other items, to our Pupil Personnel Services presentation. So we have our Special Education Director, Jill Post, is going to give us a presentation this evening. Good evening, Ms. Post.
Press and hold until it's green.
Okay, now that's working.
Trustees, we have a printed version at the table.
So good evening, trustees and Dr. Iverson. This presentation was born out of a conversation between Dr. Iverson and myself when she first arrived, and we had several conversations about sort of the state of PPS, which I just want everyone to understand is pupil personnel services. It's not only special education, it encompasses many, many areas. So one of the things I wanted to do was give everybody here and at home an overview, and this is not an exhaustive list of all the duties that are under the PPS director. So obviously a lot of what the role encompasses is creating and supervising special education programs, preventing litigations by ensuring the teams create legally defensible IEPs, giving appropriate services to students based on their least restrictive environment, supervision of the sub-CSE chair people and their professional development, supervision and evaluation of all special education teachers, aides, and related service providers, homeschooling, hospital instruction, home instruction oversight, hiring of outside curriculum support agencies when that's needed, evaluating the special ed programs for effectiveness, such as the ones that are currently being used, like Get Ready to Learn and the All Points LBA and KNEMS, writing and managing grants, 611, 619. We just finished the DCIP grants for special education. Also under this role is Title IX investigations, DASA lead for the entire district. I coordinate and work with the foster and homeless liaisons. I do budget planning, Medicaid supervision for reimbursement of services for all students, superintendent hearings, and manifestation reviews after students with disabilities have been suspended. Impartial hearings at times, staff recruitment and development and training, planning and hiring for extended school year for our students who need summer services, whether that is here or in other out-of-district programs. This is not going. Left? Oh, thank you. So under the PPS director, the oversight and supervision includes psychologists, of which there are 6, speech therapists, of which there are currently 7 on staff, and a consultant from outside to handle the overflow, 6 social workers, 4 guidance counselors, 23 aides, 8 nurses at the private schools in the district nearby because we have to supply them nurses as well, and 2 LPNs for individual students. There are 40 teachers and 43 teaching assistants. We have 1 staff OT and 2 who come in and consult. I have a civil service team, of whom most are here. Thank you very much for coming and supporting and helping, always, of 5. We have a BCBA, a board certified behavior analyst for the district, for the staff. And we have a PT. We have 2 consulting currently. Those are based on need and sometimes are increased as need increases. So the role of the CPSE CSE chairperson was recently eliminated as of June 30th. So prior to that elimination for the past 5 years, the role was filled by a per diem person who worked approximately 220 days per year chairing meetings and serving as a second administrator in the department and helping me to run the department. Last year, the BOE cut the role down to 150 days. 40 days were added by Superintendent Chase and myself through the 611 and 619 grants. We were only allowed to use 30 of those days, which had to be completed in by June 30th of 2021. Just to give you an idea of what July and August alone looked like in our department, in summer school, we had 2 psychologists, 1.5. I alone chaired 20 meetings. There were 10 more meetings chaired by the 2 summer psychologists. They also conducted 5 evaluations. So we have a very heavy workload year-round. This is a very, very busy department, and I just wanted to give everybody an overview. Prior to 5 years ago, when that per diem was hired, there was longer than a 10-year history of 2 people in this administrative partnership. So I put on the next 2 slides the history dating back to the 2-person administrative partnership, which you can see for yourself. The partnership is crucial. Every district of this size in all the neighboring counties, Rockland, Putnam, Dutchess, and Westchester, has 2 people in the department for a district of this size. 2 people work together. They make the best decisions for students together. They confer. They talk about least restrictive environment. They do a lot of work keeping a system of checks and balances with one another. It also prevents me from having to call the attorneys quite as often because I don't need to check in. I have that person with me. But I do love calling our attorney. She's very helpful. So as you can see, there is a very long history. We went back to 2004 just to show that there is a history of 2 administrative leads in this department. Sometimes they are PPS and special education. Sometimes it's a CSE, CPSE chairperson. But there are always 2 administrators in this role. For a period of 3 years, there was a time when there was only 1 person in the district who had that role. During those 3 years, there were 3 stipulations that are currently still being paid for based on that time. So understand that those 2012 to 2015 decisions that got made landed the district in paying for out-of-district placements, non-NYSED approved placements. I don't know what the history behind that was in those recommendations, but I just know that those recommendations came at a cost that we're still paying today. So decisions that are made by this department have long-lasting impact fiscally on the department. To give you an overview of the last 3 years of our CSE, CPSE numbers of meetings that are held, you can see over the 3 years from 1920, 2021 to 2022, for 504 meetings and initial meetings, CPSE meetings. We did a current poll just now of our current numbers, and currently there are 333 CSE IEPs, that's K through 12, 50 504 plans, which also falls under our department, even though they are school-based, 71 CPSE IEPs, that's for preschool, and there are a total of 454 as of, I think that date was 8/1 we pulled, or is that today? 8/1. Sorry, you don't have those numbers in front of you. Like I said, we literally just did an updated poll just to get a more current number.
Oh,
I
okay,
can give
thank
you that.
you.
I apologize for not having that on the slide. But I just wanted to give you an updated number as much as possible. Oops. So tomorrow is actually October 6th, and we have a data snapshot that we work with the data department, the IMO data department. Between initial referrals, 504 referrals, and in conjunction with possibly 30 to 40 transfer students that have come in just in September alone for this year. That is what we are currently dealing with in September and October. We are trying to get those data numbers correct so that we make sure we get enough funding from the state. Those data points are masterfully handled by our department, by our civil service team, because if they're not correct, we don't get enough funding from the state. So everything about special education translates back to money at the end of the day. And so for that, I am thankful to my team again, because we have an incredible team, and along with Carlos Ramirez's team, we do our best to keep our numbers correct so we get every dollar back. And with Lisa's team, we try our best to get every dollar back. So related services are always a big expense, and you can just see some of the numbers that we deal with annually. The first two organizations, Westchester Therapy, Therapeutic Horizons, we spend nearly $200,000. They provide additional supports for OT, PT. Last year we had an issue with speech therapists. That cost us an inordinate amount of money until we were able to hire a speech therapist due to that loss that we had in the community. We have other agencies that do parent training for us. That runs us almost $50,000. Speech agencies outside, $108,000. Vision services, $85,000. So somewhere roughly around $432,000, not including additional evaluations, tutoring for home and hospital instruction, IDT placements, which is intensive day treatment, where our kids who are under intense stress sometimes need to go for a short period of time, and we utilize the BOCE services for those children. So again, some of the numbers are a moving target, because we're always handling emergencies and always having to work in a place of, I have to find placements that are appropriate for our students who are in crisis. That's just a reality of being in special education and in PPS. We deal with a crisis often. It's not, it's really almost not a crisis. It's really a regular thing for us, unfortunately. For our out-of-district placements, placed by us, the district, we have 12 students currently placed in out-of-district in other districts. So we have students placed in other districts who take students from us in more appropriate programs than we can currently offer. Charter schools, we have 4 students. That number we cannot control. We don't place those children. They choose to go to charters, and we have to pay them back. That's the state law. So again, those numbers can jump from 2 to 4 to 6 to 8. We have no way of predicting that. A parent just decides to go, and we have to pay whatever they tell us to pay. We have placed 16 students in BOCES at a cost of $1.68 million. We do get some of that back from BOCES. Lisa could give you a better figure of how we get reimbursed by using the BOCES system. Again, we have these retro billings, Department of Social Services. They send us bills for students. We can't control it. They send us a bill and they say, hey, you owe us this money back. This kid lives in your district, and we have to pay that. So we are currently receiving 4 students since I arrived here in the last 3 years who are coming from other districts that are paying us to take their students, because we have more appropriate programs than those districts do. So that's bringing us in, I'm sorry, it's a little down, about $443,000. And that's, again, part of something that a special education director, a PPS director does. I'm out in buildings all the time in a typical year. I'm evaluating those programs and the efficacy. I'm looking at the numbers in the programs to see where we have space. Sometimes I might put out, we have a listserv, and I'll say we have space in our 812 program. I've built an 812 program pre-K to 12 here. It's been very successful, and it's being very, very well utilized. Those are kids that would normally be at a BOCES or an out-of-district program. It's saving us an inordinate amount of money by being able to build those programs and have them be successful because they're so well supported. A lot of professional development, a lot of training over the last 3 years for those teachers, and they're doing an amazing job of keeping those kids from going to out-of-district programs, which is where we want them. We want them here. They're our kids. We want them here as much as possible. They belong in our community, and we want them in our community. Talking about the hours that are spent for a typical CSE meeting. Typically in our district, our psychologists and some of our social workers are all trained as CSE chairs. They're sub-chairs. That means that they can handle an annual review, no problem, by themselves. They confer with me or with the other administrator in the district if they have any questions. But typically, if it's a pretty simple meeting and they're familiar with the kid, they do the best job. They know the kids. They're in the building with them every day. They do a great job. However, initial evaluations, which are the things that administrators chair in this district because it is a very hard, you have to have a lot of deep knowledge about students, and it takes many, many hours, not just the testing and assessments that are done in advance by psychologists. The teachers do the education evaluations. Our social workers do social intakes. We might need speech OT or PT evaluations for those initial evaluations. After those evaluations are done, the CSE CPSE chair then has to spend several hours reading over every evaluation, asking questions, possibly calling someone who did an evaluation. If there's a question, then the meeting is held, and usually they take anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half at the day of, on the day of the meeting. After the meeting, the chairperson then spends another, let's say, 2 hours reviewing and finalizing the IEP, ensuring that it's finalized. We have a 60-day deadline from the day we get consent to the day we have to place the child and have that meeting. So we're under very tight timelines, and it is just constant with initial evaluations, especially since COVID started. Every district director will tell you we've had more initial requests than they've ever seen in a lifetime. So while the chair is handling these responsibilities in the office, the director is able to be out seeing teachers, seeing students out in schools, creating a presence of the special education department for staff, and informing instructional decisions. So again, there's a reason why there needs to be 2 administrators, one who can do more of the work at the CSE level and one who's doing more work out in the buildings and conferring with principals and is helping to support. So prior litigations, as I said earlier, we have in stipulation settlements about $523,000 a year. That dated back to when we had one administrator in that role. We've been able to avoid, since there's been more stabilization in the last 5 years or so, when that per diem person was in, and then when I came in almost 3 years ago, we've been able to stabilize, and we haven't had new stipulations, which I'm very happy about. We're able to find our kids placements and appropriate programs, whether it's here or elsewhere, that are New York State approved, which again is better for the kids, better for the district fiscally, better for everyone involved. I was also asked to talk about the Special Education Quality Assurance, the CEQA, why we are identified as a needs assistance district. This has been an oversight that is provided to us by the state and support that's provided by the state. We're in the 2nd year of this oversight based on the 2018-2019 Students with Disabilities ELA and math scores. We had an overabundance of students who were rated as level 1 on those math and ELA tests. So that put us in a needs assistance category for the state. In year 1 of the CEQA, I'm proud to say that they spent the whole year. The state was with us, they supported us, they came to 10 of our CSE meetings randomly, and as a result of all the work that our CPSE chair and I had done, we ended the year with no corrective actions from the state. So I'm very proud to say that our team, those psychologists, myself, my CSE chair, worked so hard and that they found nothing that needed to be, a corrective action. They're with us for another year, because due to COVID, everybody is under a 2-year review. So it is a 2-year process. They will be here again this year providing assistance to us. As I said, we were cited for what we call performance. We were underperforming as a target district based on those students with disabilities. CEQA is here. The state provides us coordinated intervention. I'm not going to read the long form of this coordinated intervention, but I just wanted you to understand that they're here almost weekly with us doing math and ELA and specific training for students with disability teachers, all the teachers who work in the self-contained classes, and all the teachers who work in the ICT classes who are special education teachers are getting training in specially designed instruction, co-teaching strategies, literacy, math. And we also have support from the WIHD FACE for family engagement. They're also helping to support our families with disabilities, with students with disabilities. So all that is great. We're getting a lot of support that's at no cost to us, and we came back with no corrective action. So it really is a very supportive environment among the state team and our Greenberg team. And the principals have been key in being able to release the teachers weekly for those meetings and so that they can have their professional development time. It has been a Herculean task to do this during COVID, during Zoom, and having the teachers be part of something where they now feel like it's a benefit to them and not a punishment to them. And I hope that I help them to feel that, because we want them to feel positive about coming to work every day under really difficult circumstances with our, some difficult kids, but also great kids, but also in a difficult circumstance where we're wearing masks, we're scared about getting sick, our kids are having a difficult time, re-entering the buildings. It's challenging. So to then have this additional state oversight, we want to make them feel like they're supported. So, that's really the COVID-19 sort of wrap up with special ed CEQA. At the beginning of the pandemic, the department lost our PPS secretary. She was allowed to move to another department. The position was then left empty for 9 months. So while we were all at home, there was no PPS secretary. It left us in an immense deficit. We were told initially to start hiring. We posted, we started to interview, and then we were told we could not hire. So for 9 months, I had no secretary in the department. The civil service team picked up the slack in an enormous way from home, from their Chromebooks. Not one meeting was really out of compliance, thanks to support from Carol. We figured out how to make it all work so that our kids got their services. We had no really big problems with, being late with meetings, and, our team really stepped up. When we were finally able to hire our fabulous new PPS secretary, we were told we had to share the role with the IB department. The PPS secretary has an immense job. Her desk is busy 24 hours a day. This title has never been a shared position, and now both departments are really left understaffed and, undersupported, and the secretary is really being pulled in a lot of directions. Now that we don't have an IB director currently, obviously, there's more time spent devoted to PPS. But when we do hopefully have another IB director, one of the things I wanted to suggest was that we have a different secretary. My final thoughts are, PPS department has a very heavy workload, as you can see, based on all the numbers I presented. It's a very difficult workload that requires a lot of care and careful eyes and being very attentive to detail. We really need 2 administrators going forward in that department and a full-time secretary to be able to run at a manageable pace so that we stay in compliance and that we continue to progress in the department. And I hope that the new superintendent and the BOE will include the new director of PPS in all these departmental decisions going forward and create cohesion and transparency for planning purposes as much as possible. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Post. Are there any questions from trustees? I see Mr. Warner.
Sure. So looking at this needs assistance piece, so we now know that procedurally we're doing well, because after the state came in and looked things over for a year, they didn't have any findings. So that's understood. The question is how you get on the list to begin with. I don't know, back at the beginning of time, before a lot of, when I was a young teacher, they taught me that there were different types of special needs and different ranges of performance, and that you could always improve the range of performance, but depending upon the mix, then the overall average performance would be somewhat limited, and it was the luck of the draw what mix you got. But I don't know how things work now. Do they correct for that? How does that work?
There's no correction for that. Every student with a disability who's considered a Regents-bound student who's not alternatively assessed takes the same exact tests as any other student who's Regents-bound, whether they have an IEP or don't have an IEP. And they just take anybody who's listed as having an IEP, and they're like, you have this many kids who have IEPs, and this many kids are at level 1, so therefore you're targeted for assistance.
That's it? All right, thank you.
The total number divided by a total number.
Do any other trustees have any questions? I see Trustee Dragic.
Hi. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for that very detailed and sobering presentation. So my first question is, I just want to make sure what your recommendation is, which is that, so you're saying, I'm looking at your last slide, which says that this department requires 2 administrators, so that would be 1 director and 1 chairperson?
Correct.
Not 2, because you presented earlier that we traditionally had 2 chairpersons.
No, we always had 1 director and either a special ed director and a PPS director, or an assistant director and a director, but two administrators have to be in the.
2 administrators plus a full-time secretary.
Correct, which has been since the beginning of time, always.
Okay, so that was my first question. And my second question is of a more general nature, which is, you gave us some numbers, but I'm just wondering, in terms of percentages, what percentage of the children in our district qualify as special ed? And then the second part of that is, how do we compare to similar districts?
So when I got here, we're at about 16%. We're on a downward trend of, I believe, 14% now. The state wants everyone to be at approximately 12%, but I can tell you that districts like Edgemont, nearby, are similar sized. I don't know anyone who's really under 14 to 16. I mean, I can't tell you. I know that I was talking to a district today. They told me they're 18%. You know, the state sets a 12% goal for everybody. So we've been on a downward trend for the last 3 years.
So my follow-up question is, in order to continue that downward trend, what is it that the district needs to provide and when, so that we don't end up with 16% of special ed kids?
Yes, so again, that's really an AIS, MTSS kind of a question. So it's providing enough adults who can provide supports to students when they're first identified as falling behind, especially right now. And you can ask all the principals when they come, and I'm sure they'll tell you how many more people they want for their math and reading, and to get everybody trained. And you know, Lori DeAndrea has been doing a bang-up job with getting our teachers trained, special ed teachers trained in LLI interventions. The interventions are going to be critical in order to prevent classification. So when I get a kid to my desk and they finally get to me for eligibility, I hope that they have a packet that thick, which we usually do, when the child has been through appropriate preventative strategies, so that I can honestly say that based on their preventative strategies, done with fidelity, that they came to me and had all this great intervention by people who are well-trained, and then my psychologists and everybody else did their testing, and they did a great job of fidelity in testing. And I can honestly say this child, yes, has a disability. He's not just impacted by COVID. He's not impacted because he's an L. He's not impacted because he was a student with an interrupted formal education, or he didn't go to preschool, but he in fact has a disability. And that's what great preventative strategies will help us to do at the table.
So, I'm sorry, this is my last question. So, how well are we doing in those preventative strategies currently in our district, do you think?
I think prior to COVID, we were doing phenomenal. We were on a really great trend. We're doing really well now. I know that we got all of our testing in. The F&P testing got done remotely. I can't speak highly enough to the teams out in the schools getting the work done and identifying the kids who are falling behind so that they don't fall farther behind. I personally think we're doing a phenomenal job here in Greenberg. And that's not just my emotional opinion, that is my honest opinion. When I get to the table and I see data, like I said, I see thick packets of data that tell me, in fact, yes, this kid has had a ton of intervention. He had it with a teacher who was well-trained, formally trained, not turnkey trained, really trained by the people that need to do the training, and that they delivered that with fidelity. I know that when they send me a student and they say this student really needs to be identified and looked at the CSE level, that I have enough information at that table with my psychologist to make a decision about them. I think we're doing a great job.
Okay, thank you.
But more people won't hurt.
Okay, thank
Kiana.
you. Trustee Dragic, are there any other trustees with questions? I see trustee Washington.
Yes, I have a question. Trustee Warner stated that the state did not find anything. He said there were no findings. That was something that,
There were no corrective actions.
no corrective actions. Can
Correct.
you explain that?
So typically, what they do is they spend the year going to your meetings, looking through your systems and procedures around the CSE meetings. And at the end of it, they give a report, and the report then informs the following year's work. So they found that we did, I guess, to a certain percentage or a certain level, I don't know what the word I want to use is that we don't need heavy corrective actions. Our systems are correct, our procedures are correct, we're within our timelines, our PWNs are correct. All the pieces that need to be happening to keep us within compliance with special education CSE meetings are all in place. So they're not focusing on that work next year. What they're focusing on is really instruction, which is great, which is where we want to focus. So the systems and structures are great. Not to say that it was perfect. There's, of course, little things that always go, and that's just life. But nothing that they felt that needed to be a corrective action that is reported to the state.
So clarifying question. So the first year was really about the systems.
Correct.
So the level ones on the math ELA and the math and ELA state, that has not been addressed yet. That's being addressed now because the instructional piece is being addressed now?
All last year, we had math and ELA every week, starting, let's say, November. We had weekly meetings. They were about an hour long for each group of teachers, K to 2, 3 to 5. They would flip-flop ELA and math. So the teachers were getting about an hour of instruction every other week for professional development in ELA and math for specially designed instruction so that they could do just better, more explicit work in their classrooms. So that has been going on all year as well. It's like a whole system. There's, again, the family component, the state's component of math, reading, specially designed instruction. There's the CSE pieces. There's a lot of different people involved from CEQA. It's not just one person. It's like a 5-person team.
All right, and then I'm going to ask 2 more questions. So what data from the professional developments weekly are we using to see if there's going to be an increase? Of course, we know that the pandemic is here, but what data are we using to see if there's going to be an increase from level 1 to maybe level 2?
So we took a look when we were doing the planning over the summer, and I'm happy to send you that. Dr. Iverson has copies of it, of the planning that we're doing for next year based on the data from this year. As a team, we met with them. We're going to look at oral reading fluency. That's one of our targets for next year. There's a math target and the oral reading fluency target. I can send you the plan. I can send you all the plan for next year. I apologize, I don't have that off the top of my head.
Okay, and then the last question I had, there's this graph that you put together, CPSE, CSE special, and the number at the bottom is 397 students.
Correct.
Does that represent the special education students in the district?
They're not
Or-
all in district. So some kids,
But they represent Greenberg.
so what we have is also what we call the district of location students that we serve. So we have 5 private schools in this area, and we have to do their IEPs and services for them, and then we have to bill back to their districts. So again, other local school districts like Edgemont have 0 schools, private schools in their district. So that's an additional load of students that we work with that we are responsible for. So they're not all Greenberg students, but they're all under Greenberg's responsibility.
So if we look at the 16%, that would equate to 397?
That's a good question. No, those state numbers are only identifying Greenberg students. Those numbers that come from the state only identify kids that live in Greenberg.
Because I was just wondering, because you had said we're doing better, and then it says 382. It looks like we were increasing.
Yeah.
So that's why I
They're
was...
not all hours, so it's a little, and it's CPSE, they count the CSE, it's how the state calculates it versus,
And then the last question.
yeah.
You said they separated your secretary for PPS, and then IB coordinator.
Correct.
Who's the they?
The assistant superintendent of business at the time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you, Trustee Washington. Are there any other trustees with any questions or comments?
I have one.
Yes?
In your presentation, it states, it looks like it's about 6 hours the chairperson spends between pre, post, and all the preparation work. Do you find that there's a specific benefit in a particular role being the chairperson, psychologist versus a social worker versus an administrator? I'm just curious.
So I think what's nice is when you have a value add. So I personally was a special education teacher. I am a special education teacher. I spent 20 plus years in a classroom knee to knee sitting with kids. So my expertise is instruction. It's nice if the second person has an expertise possibly in a different discipline of special education. So I think that's a nice match. So if I were to hire, I would probably look for somebody who had the clinical background to support my non-clinical background. So I don't think there's a hard and fast answer to that. But of course, you know, it's more philosophical than that. But I think it's nice when you have a value add of all the clinical, you know, processes together. It's a team effort, it's a team lift.
Thank you.
Sure.
Are there any other trustees with questions, comments, additional questions? I had a few, but I want to let everyone go. So, Ms. Post, I saw your presentation. I thought it was great, but I did have a couple of questions about mental health.
Sure.
And that does fall under your
Sure.
department. And I'm wondering if your department has any preliminary numbers or percentages for how that may or may not have needs for mental health within our district from pre-K through 12 may or may not have increased since the COVID pandemic hit. And we're going back to school now.
Right. So the way that I would probably measure that would be to, I can tell you that my psychologists right now at the high school are telling me that their mandated caseload is beyond full. They're at 40% of caseload. In addition to their chairperson duties, they're literally at 40% doing counseling. So the easiest way to pull that kind of data as a hard data point is to look at how many students are receiving counseling mandated and non-mandated, which is not a hard number to find. But just in my weekly meetings with my psychologists, we are actually down a psychologist right now. We're actually really have been down 2 psychologists right now, unfortunately due to some issues, but they're all at their max capacity of caseload, which, you know, and again, not all of it is mandated. So when I say mandated, that means what's on the IEP that they're mandated to receive. They also have the kids, the social workers and the psychologists have kids and the guidance counselors have kids walking in saying, I need some support. So there's more of that going on. The numbers are informal at this point. I don't have the hard numbers, but, you know, again, the psychologists, all I have to do is pull them and tell them, keep data, how many kids are popping into your office. They keep logs on every kid. So it's an easy number to figure out, but I can tell you that there's a massive increase. We have kids who are still not able to show up to school. They're just not coming in. We're having to send, you know, psychologists, social workers out to go check on them, where, you know, there's a lot of stress still with returning to school.
Okay, so what is the plan for that? Like, what's the department going to do
So
about that?
there's a few different things that are going on. We're trying to increase the time where they have to do non-mandated counseling. That is always a plan. So you're allowed to have non-mandated and mandated students together. I've told all the teams that during our weekly meetings, if you need to pull in those non-mandated kids with mandated kids, it's perfectly fine to do that. Find the time to see them, work with your teams. But the problem is there's only so many hours in a day. I do think that a good idea is to have, you know, again, some non-mandated counselors coming in and doing push-in, tier 1, for all kids to do SEL lessons. We're trying to bring in an SEL program at K1 now that we've been using in pre-K. We've ordered Second Step for that social work clinical team to be pushing into classrooms. You know, I'd like to see that go all the way up the grade. So we have one program, but that's going to be, you know, a bigger conversation.
Okay, thank you. Can you tell me anything about our life skills program on the secondary level, please?
Sure, absolutely. So our life skills program, we have 7 to 12, is a wonderful program. I've brought in a team called, and you'll see they're in there, the ABA team. I'm so proud of them. They used to be called the Carbone Clinic. We're doing a program. We're training all the teachers and the TAs in this program called Essential for Living. It's an evidence-based program that addresses the essential 8 skills that kids will need to transition into adult living. So whether that adult living includes going to a residential home or living within their own home with their own family, that is one program that we're really focused on. We've been implementing it. The BCBA here works with the BCBA from All Points LBA. They come in every 2 weeks or so to each of the programs. I have it going actually 4th through 12th this year because we felt that the RJ Bailey kids should get an earlier start. The younger kids are using what's called ABLES assessment, which is for kids up to age 5 developmentally. The Essential for Living program takes over sort of where that leaves off. So it gives those kids essential skills to be able to, from waiting and saying, no, and doing simple things to harder things like doing their laundry, doing those life skills that they're going to need to be able to live in a residential facility, because not every kid will get a place in a residential facility as an adult if they don't have those skills. So that's the program and the team that we brought in this year to work very closely with those life skills programs. We've ordered a lot of stuff. Everything they told us to order, I found in my 611 grant is in there to order. It's from washing machine. We've been working with Mr. Falcone to get that installed. So the one that's there wasn't working. So things like that, so that they can really learn those life skills in addition to their math and ELA skills, of course. But really, we want kids who are in those life skills programs to think of their literacy as being able to read stop signs, fill out a form for themselves. That is really what constitutes literacy. And if they're nonverbal, to be able to use their assisted technology devices, that's their literacy. So those are the focus of my life skills programs that we're working on the last couple of years.
Is there any update on when those products are going to come that are?
Everything's in order that needed to be ordered. So a chunk came in, more chunks are coming in.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're trickling in.
Yeah.
All right.
Things are very slow to move right now with the pandemic.
2 more questions.
Sure.
Do you your department, I don't know who the person would be, use community partners? Because we have a lot of businesses in Fairview, Hartsdale, unincorporated Greenberg area that could employ as well some of our graduates.
Yeah.
Whether they, go off to trade schools or not, but they may want to work. Do we
Right.
have community partners that we work with?
We did have community partnerships that were going well until COVID. So we did, and, nobody's doing that work. We were all remote, and we had a job coach in the budget that was lovely, but I couldn't hire because we weren't going out into the field. So I pushed it off because setting up community partnerships is very hard right now.
I'm sorry, you said you had a job what in
A
the
job
budget?
coach, so.
Oh, job coach,
Yep,
thank you.
I had that budgeted in my budget, and we put off hiring for it. But I'd like to think about that again for this year because maybe more will open up. But yes, prior to that, we did have somebody else that was going out into the community and working with our kids and taking them on site, and there was all sorts of different places they were going out into the workforce and doing. And that's, again, what this All Points LBA, they work with the teams to help that happen as well.
Awesome. Last
Yeah,
question.
sure.
IDTs, I didn't see the numbers in here. I saw it kind of bunched in.
Oh, IDC Intensive Day Treatment, they go for 90 days. So it could be a kid here, a kid there. It could be 5 kids a year, 3 kids a year, 6 kids a year.
So
it's
do we
an
fluctuate
emergency.
between 3 and 6 kids a year
Yeah.
that go through IDT? Okay.
Yeah. And again, it's a short-term intervention. And then we might have other interventions working with BOCES, a before and after school program that helps get kids who are school avoidant get into the building. So lots of programs to help our school avoidant kids, which I'm utilizing a lot of right now.
Okay, thank you. I don't think, I don't have any other questions. I don't think any other board members do. That was a long presentation,
Sorry.
but good, thank you. No, we had a lot of questions. Thank you. And good luck with everything.
Thank you all.
Okay, everyone, continuing to move through our agenda, we have number A6, which is committee reports. Are there any committees that have a report this evening? I don't see, I see trustee Warner. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I see trustee Warner and trustee Thomas.
You want to go first?
Now you can go first.
All right. The Finance and Facilities Committee held a meeting on September 30th. It was via Zoom, started at 6:30 p.m. In attendance were Ashley Pineda, Chris Valen, David Warner, Lisa Raymond, Michael Falcone, Amy Ashley Moore, Laser Alert, Carol Allen, Gabriella Barahoma, Dave Bridgelall, Megan Hawk, Katie McGee, Donna Morton, Steve Morton, Fred Seba, James Wadick, Faisal Siddiqui, Sarah Lazari, and Walter Simon. We introduced ourselves, elected David Warner as chair of the committee, modified last year's charges regarding our 5-year financial plan and the comprehensive annual financial report for submission to the superintendent. We'll hand that off to you, and you can come up with what you want to have on the agenda. Determined that we have monthly meetings this year instead of on an as-needed basis. Schedule will follow. We'll try and make it Wednesdays or Thursdays. Reviewed financial items. CRRSA grant money has been awarded and will cover $575,000 worth of Phase 1 ECP mechanical ventilation issues. The American Rescue Plan approval is still pending. That was $2 million total, 1.6 of which is dedicated to ventilation. The energy performance contract. There were 3 responses to the RFP submitted with varying scopes ranging from $3 million all the way up to $11 million. We can negotiate scopes and ask for additional information from respondents to better compare responses. Some proposals include off-peak energy battery storage options. So power is cheaper, I guess, at certain times of day than other times of day. You store it in a battery and then you run off the battery. And that happens to also mean that if our power goes down, we'll have a little bit of battery backup. Next steps are to select one firm. The firm will provide a detailed energy audit. It'll take them about 2 months to do that. Then the board will end up approving an ESCO contract. Our external audit should be completed in the next 2 months. The audit committee will meet after that. Chris Lazari and Michael Owens will be on the board agenda for approval as audit committee members. I think it's on the agenda tonight. Our 5-year budget projection may be subsumed within the comprehensive annual financial report, which is in process. We may recommend Board of Education require annual completion of this report as a policy once a draft has been completed and we've had a chance to look at it and see how well we like it. Repair reserve fund balance will depend on the leftover funds from fiscal 2021, which is still being finalized. Lisa's been working with the auditors. Proposition 1 creates a capital reserve for multi-year savings, not limited to only repairs. That is, if you need to upgrade something like replace a roof. Public vote for this proposition is scheduled for December 14th of this year because we wish to make use of the fund in fiscal 22-23, and New York State Education Department may delay approval of the projects if we attempt to create, populate, and expend money from the fund all at once in the same fiscal year. If you do it simultaneously, that's not what they want. We reviewed the status of our facilities, switching gears, and here's the division if you're talking about whether you want to have 2 committees or not. This is why the meeting is so long. So we kicked over to the second half. ECP main building, repairs, heating, temporary ventilation fixes, and window replacements are complete. At ECP, students and administrative staff returned from Highview for school opening. Phase 1, BBS reports that we're on schedule for fall submission of Phase 1 to New York State Education Department. Phase 1 is primarily mechanical ventilation fixes and a portion of the Highview roof. High school vestibule, that's the security vestibule, in process. BBS submitted plans to New York State Education Department on the 30th of July. An addendum is required and should be submitted this month. The mansion roof, New York State Education Department approved the plans as of April of this year. We're currently resolving funding issues. Playgrounds, Lee F. Jackson, Highview, and R.J. Bailey playgrounds are all complete. I'm sure you've seen them. They're beautiful. Curbs and sidewalks. This was initially an initiative required by our insurance company. ECP and Lee F. Jackson are complete. Other schools are in process. We are also, for safety purposes, estimating the cost of widening the Woodlands Gym access road. High school, auditorium floor and carpet are done. Well, we're sitting here right now. You can look at the carpet. As per the walkthrough, there's termite damage in the large gym floor. We kind of patched it over. It needs further work. R.J. Bailey classroom floor replacement is complete. The gym floor is to be done. Mechanical ventilation for R.J. Bailey is part of Phase 1. The roof and auditorium remain issues as per the BCS, and that's probably for phase 2, which is the next thing we'll put together. Leaf Jackson, asbestos tile removal requires 7 to 8 days with no students in the building. We saw this during the facilities walkthrough, so they've kind of glow-coated it so that it's safe for now. We're looking at possibly a holiday or winter break project. If you can get the asbestos removal done, then you can replace the tiles themselves over time on weekends or evenings. But you've got to have nobody in the building while you do the asbestos replacement. Tennis courts, we need to update the cost estimate. I think the last one's from 2003. The bus garage boiler is in process. A high school wheelchair ramp, we talked about how expensive that is. It's listed as $200,000 because we were trying to put the new security vestibule out front here and then only have a single entrance at this end of the building that was actually used for anything other than an emergency exit. But $200,000 is a lot of money. So we're thinking about, the question is, can you create a wheelchair ramp instead? And that's being kicked back to the architects and they'll look at it. The Morton House, the electricity, they finally disconnected and the water was disconnected shortly thereafter. The structure has been torn down. Next item, we briefly discussed improvements for project status spreadsheet. We have a big spreadsheet that covers all of these projects, including adding BBS priorities. That is, we prioritized every item we've got of things that need to be fixed in the district, and we should include that on the spreadsheet. And whether items are considered appropriate for the capital fund, that is if you want to replace something, the repair reserve fund for large repairs, or the general fund for small repairs. This would ensure allocation of appropriate funding sources. Finally, we discussed the status of the mansion, including the history of facilities issues from the summer of 2019 to the present, roof issues, evacuation to Woodlands and Leaf Jackson, the move to an all 4-year-old ECP program at the same time, ventilation issues, COVID-19 delays, Board and NYSED approval of the roof fix, the plumbing emergency, and funding allocation issues. Requirements to reoccupy the mansion for both staff and ECP students. BBS architects toured the mansion this week and will provide revised cost estimates by next month's meeting. Allowable uses per the Warburg deed. Per legal, once a school building is erected, restrictive covenants to the school site itself cease, but restrictions on surrounding school sites and the property as a whole may limit allowable uses. We can't do anything with the mansion that disrupts Woodlands, ECP, or the Warburg campus as a whole. If we're repurposing the mansion, legal requests, school site maps, and information submitted to NYSED for the surrounding schools are needed, and a single desired alternative use prior to the rendering of an opinion and its legality needs to go to legal, not 12 options, our best option, and they'll tell us if we can do it or not. The committee opted to reconvene at our next monthly meeting. In the meantime, we should determine whether new federal aid for ventilation projects allows us to reallocate Phase 1 funding to repair the mansion roof, the amount of remaining funds after closing the books on 2020-2021 school year, the latest BBS cost estimate for reoccupying the mansion, ECP classroom population requirements, if we want to get the 3-year-old program going again, any changes to administrative staff requirements. The meeting adjourned at approximately 9:45 p.m. The next meeting is now scheduled for October 28th at 6:30 p.m. via Zoom. We'll post a link on the website. Thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Warner. Does anyone have any questions or comments? I see Trustee
Yes.
Pineda.
So, David, two comments. The first one, can you remind the public how the energy performance contract is funded? And the second item is, can you also please mention the fact if there will be any potential overlap between some of the EPC and the BCS items? Thank you.
The energy performance contract funds itself. So basically what happens is money gets spent up front to make the buildings more energy efficient, and then the savings on our utility bills tend to pay for the contract. And they scope the contract based on what they think they can do such that they'll end up making a profit. If they can't make a profit off it, the contract gets smaller. So that's kind of where that is. What was the second thing you wanted to know?
If you could touch on whether there could be some potential overlap of items that are covered by the EPC but will also on the BCS punch list.
We're thinking that, that was going to be about $5 million, depending upon the scope of the actual contract. If we end up with a $3 million contract, it won't cover all those items. If we go with an $11 million contract, it may be that not everything, they're doing more than we were looking for in the building condition survey.
Yeah, and I think the key takeaway there is if we can leverage the EPC to take care of as many items as possible that are already on our BCS, then that allows us to focus our efforts on the remaining BCS items when we have to go out to our public taxpayers and ask for some assistance.
You are correct.
Thank you.
Okay, and Trustee Dragic, I saw you.
Yes, so, David, we are still having a vote in December to create the,
Correct,
I just
because
lost
if
it.
we wait until if we wait till the May vote,
Right.
then it won't take effect usually until close to the beginning of the next fiscal year. And
Right,
then if we
so
try
I-
to expend phase two from that fund, they'll look and say, hey, you created this thing in the same year that you're spending from it. But if we do the vote back in December, then it'll be the next year before we try and withdraw from it, and they won't push back on us.
I understand. So I think one of my concerns is that currently, maybe a lot of people are confounding this vote with the mansion roof. And I understand that that's really not the point, but I'm just wondering if before the vote, we're actually going to be able to determine whether, because this was already approved by the board and the voters, the fixing of the mansion roof, if we will know if we can actually find an alternative source of funding to just go ahead with that project, which has already been approved by the SED.
That's what we're asking for,
Got
and
it.
we're doing research on that. And Lisa, do you know anything yet? Not yet.
Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
Okay, any other board members with questions, statements? Yes, Trustee Washington.
Yes, I have a question in regards to Phase 1, in regards to ventilation. So what's happening?
So the biggest ticket item in Phase 1 is the $3 million that we need to spend on R.J. Bailey. Those 30 classrooms, each with a box that brings in fresh air from the outside, those intake boxes. So what's supposed to happen is that we are supposed to submit this fall the entire set of Phase 1 fixes, $5.1 million worth of fixes spread out all over all the schools, but a lot of it's from Bailey. And then the NYSED comes back with an approval, and that will require several months. And then next summer, if all goes well, we can start construction.
So next summer, 2022, if all
Yes.
goes well. All right, so when will the information be submitted? Like, what is the actual date? So, go ahead.
Okay, so two things have to happen in order to make sure that, that things are in place. A set of plans gets submitted from the architects, and that's not a problem. They can do that very soon.
Okay.
The other question is they're going to want to come back and say, have you specified your funding source? And I want to make sure that we don't have to change our funding source after we make the submission. So I'm thinking that we should know where we stand and what we're doing with our money by the end of this month. So
Okay.
stay tuned.
Thank you, because I really want to press the issue because there are students in the buildings, and we need a ventilation system. So as soon as possible,
Right,
please
so
get
that
the
we don't have to
plans
have the temporary fix we have now, which are the fans. right?
Exactly.
Pull the fans out, have all the air preheated when it comes in. That's the goal.
Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Washington. Any other board members with questions, comments about finance and facilities? I do have a couple of questions about finance. You did say that we were going to be creating the appropriate funding sources. Why was the money not put into the appropriate funding sources?
Lisa, do you want to talk to this?
I'm not I'm not sure what you're asking. What funding sources?
So, Mr. Warner, I believe it was a detailed report, thank you, but I believe you were saying that one of the reasons why we need to have our vote in December is to create appropriate funding sources, such as,
Give her the three-track, the three-track lecture of the three different possible funds that you can deal with facilities.
To do a project, is that what you're asking?
I don't want to
funding sources
lecture, I
to do
just
a-
want to know why the monies were not put into the appropriate funding sources.
Well, money was put into the repair reserve because the repair reserve was created. It can only be used for repairs, so some of the work that is needed are not qualifying as repairs. A capital reserve was never set up. That's why we're going to ask the voters to set up a capital reserve, which acts like a savings account, so money can be put into that. And at the last meeting, you approved the resolution and what it would say. So it would be, for a specific dollar amount over X number of years, so that you could then go to the taxpayers and say, we want to use X number of millions of dollars to do, say, Phase 2.
Okay.
And then the other funding source would be the capital interfund transfer. You can put money in there to send to the capital fund, but you have to earmark it for a specific project because you're asking the taxpayers to put the money in that reserve, and you have to tell them exactly what it is you want to use that money for.
Okay, thank you. Now, the next question I have is about, a trustee brought this to my attention, with the Finance and Facilities Committee. There was talk of funds being used for hiring staff through the American Rescue Plan money, specifically teaching assistants. It was a very long meeting. I was listening, but I didn't hear that part exactly, so forgive me if I'm misquoting that part. But can you talk a little bit about some of the American Rescue Plan monies being used to hire teaching assistants and how that will or will not affect the board, how we'll move forward with that after the monies end?
So right now, we are making accommodations for some of our teaching staff. And in order to do that, if a teacher cannot be has to be separate from the students, we're putting a teacher assistant in those classes. So in order to help all of our schools and to alleviate these problems that we're having, because we have to make the accommodations because of COVID, we are going to use some of our American Rescue Plan money that is designated to that 20% learning loss to hire TAs to help supplement these situations in all of our schools. As the year goes on and as we plan for future budgets, we can see what positions we still need, if we need to keep any of those TAs, or if we want to make that part of our budget, we'll just try to build that and incorporate it into future budgets to keep those positions.
Thank you. My last question is about facilities/finance. It's both, I guess. In the business report this week, we did get an estimated cost. It was a range to deal with that entrance to the athletic field.
Yes.
And it sounds like it's for a curb cut or widening the
It's-
curb.
So Mr. Falcone has told me that we would have to obviously take the curbs, we'd have to take those out. He's going to widen on the one side, maybe on both sides, I'm not positive, but I know on the one side he's going to widen it, and then it has to be leveled and flattened out, et cetera. He's had the contractor there to give him a rough estimate, because they don't, well, one, they can't give us a concrete number, and another, they don't know what they're going to find when they start doing some of the demolition of the work. Just like was at LF Jackson, if you remember, he gave us an estimate for the work to be done there, but once the curb was taken away, then they found some other issues and they had to go further, so that just added to the work.
Okay.
So he gave us a range so that we would have a high and low end.
So, just for transparency, I want to talk about that range. So the range is 70 to 100,000 for a widening of one particular area. That
And to
does
replace the curbs.
I know what?
And to replace the curbs. So remember, it's not just the curbs in that section, it's all of the curbs. So It's down by the school in that circle. There's curbs there. There are curbs in that parking lot to the right that have to be redone.
So you're redoing the whole entire thing? You're not redoing just the entrance where it's extremely thin?
Correct.
Okay, so that's a little bit different than I understood as far as the scope, so that's very helpful. My last question about that particular estimate, because it shocked me, actually, because I was thinking of one area, so I'm happy that that's a full area. The last question is, do we get more than one, what do you call it, quote on this? Or are we locked into the
Well,
one contractor that we've hired?
If you remember, what happens every year is we do, at a certain time of year, go out for bids, okay, on BidNet, and we use I know that Mr. Falcone contacted the contractor that we currently have through that bid. Though we could, I'm not positive that we could go out to bid again because he was awarded the bid for the school year, so I believe that we would have to stay with him.
So we can't bid like per project, we bid for the year, and then whatever projects we do within that year, we utilize that contractor?
Usually that's what we do. I'm not
Okay.
going to say that we couldn't go out to bid. I'd have to find out for sure.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, so the next committee report, I'm sorry, Trustee Valen?
If I may, President Maris, I just want to clarify something about the vote in December, because there's been a lot of talk about funds and monies and projects, and I just want to clarify, the vote on December 14th, the first proposition is just dealing with setting up a capital reserve fund. It's a shell, it's creating an account. It's not funding it, it's not putting money into it, it's not asking for more money from the public, it's just creating the account where the funds will be held. If anyone else wants to explain a little bit further, or if you think that's clear enough, great, but I want that to be very clear to the public. We're not asking for money in December. We're
Right.
asking for the ability to set up a fund, set up an account. That's
We're-
all. Thank you.
We're asking for the ability to create the reserve, which has to be by voter approval, but in the same breath, we're asking that in the future, over the next 10 years, if we are to have excess money available like at the end of the year, give us permission to take that money and put it into the reserve up to a certain dollar amount. Right. The vote in December is really just to establish the reserve and to create a time frame and a maximum dollar limit over that 10 years. No money is being asked to transfer into it at that time.
So I don't know if this question is for Ivy or Carol, or maybe another board member can clarify for me. We actually voted to put monies into, was it the
No.
repair reserve?
No.
If left over after?
What you did do is we asked the taxpayers during the budget vote this past May that any excess funds over the 4% we're allowed to hold as an emergency by law. Anything that's over that 4%, taxpayers will allow us to put it in the repair reserve. So once the audit is done and we know what that excess is, that amount can be transferred to the repair reserve, and then the board can have because the taxpayers did that, and they know and have given us permission to have the money in the repair reserve, the board will hold another hearing, like it did previously, to get the money to phase 1 from the repair reserve, to move the money to the capital reserve.
Beautiful. Thank you for clarifying. I didn't even need Ivy or Carol. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions about finance or facilities? Because we're going to move on to the CEC report. Seeing none, Trustee Thomas, please continue.
Thank you. So this is the meeting notes for the Community Engagement and Communications Committee. Thank you for David for putting them together. The attendees were Jamal Thomas, David Warner, Tanya Dragic, Laser Alert, Edith Horn, Steve Morton, Roy Finichel, Liz Anastasia, Jessica Muldoon, Sarah Lazari, Walter Simon, Samantha Ives, Kelly Sheehan, and Amy Hong. I was elected as the chair for the CEC, so I thank the community for that. We adopted the minutes from 4/26 and 5/24. We discussed our committee charges, and we are going to be, by the next board meeting, making sure that we complete those charges. We're looking to set smart community outreach goals for the year, and we're going to confirm what those are going to be during our next CC meeting. We reviewed fall school opening, where Dr. Iverson did so, and the major points to bring out is that students are back in school. The process went smooth. The atmosphere is positive. Our school enrollment actually increased at Highview from 221 to 242, so that's a positive. There have been some challenges related to bus shortages. Drivers are getting sign-on bonuses and things like that from the other districts, but we've done some route combining and contacted parents to inform them of all of the changes and the staff shortages, and we are going to be continuing to staff up. We're implementing a social and emotional learning initiative to monitor students' readjustments to full-time in-person instruction. There were some questions that I don't know that we need to read all here. Or I guess maybe, this is my first one, forgive me. How often do you meet with principals one-on-one to review goals? That's something that Dr. Iverson does monthly. How will we increase New York State elementary ELA test percentage of students scoring 3+ above 50%? The GSD caught up with the New York State average of 45% in 2009 prior to COVID remote learning and test suspension. Students have lost some instructional time due to the pandemic, and we will continue to deliver high-level instruction to remediate and make up any lost ground. This is going to take some time. We have increased student enrollment. I just mentioned that. How do we want to promote and enforce, monitor mask wearing and staff vaccination for COVID-19? We're using the recommendations of Westchester County, so staff must either show proof of vaccination or undergo weekly testing for COVID-19, and we are concluding our implementation of agreements with the employee unions, as well as the testing sites, which are August staff vaccination. Oh, and we're doing an August staff vaccinations survey. With that new survey will be mandatory. How the testing and vaccination processes work for students. The vaccines are not yet available for students, and Westchester County does not require it, but parents can voluntarily sign up their students for weekly testing. Should parent groups continue to advertise and promote parent completion of free and reduced lunch forms? Has this process been changed? Title I is important to this district, and we're going to get back to the community with regard to those forms. We discussed stakeholder outreach. Dr. Dragic brought up topics around contacting various different neighborhood associations, the town of Greenburgh, parent contacts, business contacts, seniors, private schools, parents, and those are things that we're going to be discussing as a committee. And picking people to create that two-way communication with the community at large. We briefly discussed propositions that were adopted by the board for public vote on December 14th. The first is the Capital Reserve Fund, which we just talked about. Proposition 2 is about allowing a high school student to become a non-voting member of the BOE. And lastly, we discussed the town of Greenburgh contacts and resources that will be useful in reaching our community goals. And we do encourage anybody who's listening who would like to be a part of the community engagement and committee meeting and communications to reach out to myself at jthomas@greenburghcsd.org or Ivy Kraus at ikraus@greenburghcsd.org to request to become a voting member. And the meeting did adjourn at slightly after 9:11 p.m.
Thank you so much, Trustee Thomas. Any questions from anyone? I'm sorry, Trustee Dragic?
So I have a general comment about this committee, which I also made during the actual meeting, which is that this committee, as evidenced by Jamal's committee report, is really sort of a hodgepodge, a little bit of everything. And it often, I'm sorry, I have to take my mask off. It often tends to basically recapitulate a lot that is said or addressed in other committee meetings and also at board meetings. So I think that as we move forward and we consider the charges of this committee and really what it should be about, that we think more community engagement and really try to funnel participants to other committees for their questions. So if they have questions about education and wellness, they should really be going to the Education and Wellness Committee, which is, by the way, meeting tomorrow at 6 p.m. If they're interested in, general questions like the ones that we discussed today, they should be at board meetings. I think it's inefficient on some level to have a committee that just kind of goes over everything that's addressed in other committees. So that's kind of my comment as we move forward and think about really what this committee should be about this year and moving forward.
I see Trustee Washington and then Valen and then Werner.
And it's so funny, Trustee Tragic, because my question was, why was the increase at Highview highlighted? And because we did get some things in our board packet, and there's decreases in other schools. So why was that part of the meeting, the increase in Highview student population? Like, I want to know the relevance.
It was a question that came up, and it was responded to by the superintendent. So I think I completely understand everything that you're saying. Certainly, it's difficult, if not impossible, to just tell people when a question comes up, like, hey, take it over there. Like, I think that we do want to set a precedent for how this committee is going to be run, and that is to truly make it so that the community can better engage with the school district and help the school district be what we know we can be. But if somebody comes and has a question, I imagine we're gonna make an attempt to
No, I do imagine if someone has a question. I was just wondering, with everything you were just saying, where did that come into play? And even the Title I aspect, like, that's more of the education and wellness. So it definitely, because it's funny, because that's what I was thinking. I was like, why were these topics brought up in that meeting? So I do think that, as you lead the meeting, definitely, please, let's get some community engagement, because you heard what Jill Post said. Like, partners aren't working with us, even though I think more partnerships are coming back. So please, let's tap into all the partnerships around us. Maybe someone will help us and donate $100 billion to us so we can get everything fixed at every building level.
Thank you, Trustee Washington.
I've been playing the lottery.
Trustee Valen.
I have a couple different points. I think I'll begin by saying that I think this board over the last few years has tried to do more of the work of the board during committees as opposed to doing during board meetings. And I think conversations with the community go hand in hand with that a lot of those conversations where you're having a two-way dialogue really should happen in a committee level as opposed to a board meeting where really we're hearing presentations and voting on items that we've worked on beforehand. So that's my 2 cents. The next point I'd like to make is I think there were some committee members on the meeting last week who more eloquently than I spoke about their thoughts that they see that as their forum, their entry point into that dialogue with the school community, and because often they don't know where to go, or they don't know what their issues, which committee it would fit under, or they just want to hear what other people have to say and to see if their individual issue is a bigger issue in the district overall. So as someone who's recently participated in all of those committees, it is the entry point for the community to engage actively with the school district. I'll also say, again, from my experience as a public person, that the other committees, the Finance and Facilities and the Community Engagement Committees are the only two committees that are truly a committee of the district, which includes community members as official members of the committees. The other committees, the public may attend, but they're not always given the right to actively participate. Many years, I was only allowed to be an observer. Different committees, the same committee, depending on the year and the membership, might allow input and questionings or might allow full participation. But those are, as of now, board committees. So I don't know if we need to discuss board committees versus district committees further in the Governance and Policy Committee, and whether we'd allow the public to have their say somehow. But those are, I guess, my 2 cents about the comments that have been made. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I said Trustee Warner and then Trustee Dragic.
Okay, so I think that the Community Engagement Committee really does need to be a place where you can have two-way dialogue with the public. That's the name. I have no objection to having people who want to study issues in greater depth going to other committees. I think many times we've had people who chair other committees come into the Community Engagement Committee, and they'll do their presentation of anything and everything that they know in depth about that particular area, and then they'll invite people from the Community Engagement Committee to come and attend their committees. And in fact, I think you did that a little bit at the last meeting, and so that's a fine thing to do too. I also acknowledge that there are other things that the Community Engagement Committee can do in terms of public outreach and events, and we always have gone back and forth between having a series of events and also having meetings in which we have a lot of dialogue. I'll tell you, if the events reach a certain size, it gets harder and harder to have the dialogue. The smaller meetings, the 15-person or so meeting size seems to work pretty well for having the maximum amount of dialogue. If you have a big message that you want to get out, the events are better. So if you go back, we didn't do this in the first meeting because we pretty much ran out of time, so we kind of skipped over it a little bit. But we had the superintendent's teas, we would have the Dads for Donuts stuff, we would have the art show at the Greenberg Town Hall, we would have the big events. And in fact, the non-board event that happened, that barbecue, that would have fit really neatly. It reminded me of the health fair a little bit from past years. So we do that too, but we need to do both. We need to have the forum in which you can have the good dialogue, and we need to have the events as well. So I would support having both in the charges.
Okay, and then Trustee Dragic?
So I guess I just, so thank you for that, David. And I just want to respond to what Chris said, which is that at some point, you know, we could have a shift in the way that we function. And generally, an entry point for parents are also the PTAs, right? That's where you actually, as a parent, get a lot of your information that actually seems to be discussed in this particular committee by parents. Not that I want to, by any stretch of the imagination, disenfranchise parents and their questions in this committee. They're a big part of the community, right? But we do have PTAs. We have teachers and building leadership that ought to be really capable of actually answering a lot of the questions that I hear coming into the CEC from parents. And so what I'm saying is that we can have some of that, but really it is a community engagement committee where I guess that's sort of my understanding of it anyway, that we're really, as the board, trying to engage the community at large, and not just the parents with their unanswered concerns and questions, which I think that there are other and perhaps even better mechanisms for answering than a board committee, or rather this is a district committee, but anyway, that was my point.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Dragic. Is there any other trustee comments or questions about the CEC committee? I did watch the CEC committee. The only thing I wanted to bring up, I checked the notes, and it was a little general about the fact that the district doesn't check correct addresses. My concern as a community member and board member watching was that specifically we had, I believe he's the president of a civic association, and I believe what his statement was that someone is using his address. So that means that that particular address, whichever student or students are using that address, is not correct. I don't know, it could be a typo. It could be, you know, fraudulent use of our schools. So Dr. Iverson was on that call. I believe he gave his address as well in the meeting. So I don't know if we could, you know, do anything about that. I see trustee Warner nodding his head. So I don't know if he wants to reply or Dr. Iverson, but that did concern me. I know several years ago, we did a full district-wide re-registration. I hope we don't need to do that, but I do hope that we are keeping eye on who's utilizing our buildings and who's not. Mr. Warner?
I can only comment that we had a person, at one point, our PPS director would go out and get reports and hide in his car and pop up if he thought that people were coming in to jump on the bus when they weren't coming out of the actual house, and take note of that. If you're officially homeless, then we get money from the state, McKinney-Vento money from the state, and that's not an issue. But if you've legitimately moved to a residence outside the district, then you're really not supposed to still be going here. So we've had different people along the lines assigned to that job. I know at one point it was the guidance secretary. That used to be one of her jobs at the high school, and I don't know where it's moved since then. But you can check on that. We did have a job title, and one of their duties was to take care of that. I think Matt Smith may have some knowledge of that.
Okay, I see Dr. Iverson writing.
And we are checking into that, especially the address that the gentleman cited at the meeting. But yes, you're talking like home visits, someone going to houses, and you get a call about maybe students not living in the residence. You had sent someone out to look at the house and, to verify it. And so I'm trying to identify who that person is. You're right, some guidance counselors did do it, but we don't have an official role of a person who does that. So these are conversations I have on my list to talk to the principals to begin when we meet this month.
Thank you so much, Dr. Iverson. Is there any other committee reports at this time? Okay, we'll move forward in our agenda to the board president's report. And I just wanted to touch on a few things. Thank you all for tuning in to our October meeting. I wanted to encourage our parents and community members, families that take care of children to please monitor your children on the internet. There's a lot of sites that children use now with COVID. Being home for long periods of time, children have been turned on to many sites, many apps, and from early age, kindergarten, first grade, they're using the tablets that we've given them and the Chromebooks, and they know how to search for things. So for safety, please continue to monitor your children. Mental health is directly affected majorly with the internet sites that are out there, so please be careful with that. I also wanted to talk about the fact that the Board of Education has a website that's going to be coming up soon. This was brought up last year, I believe, in the CEC committee, or maybe even the year before. So we are working on that behind the scenes. Of course, the full board here is going to see the website, and it will go live soon. So we are slowly working on that. I just wanted to put that out there. We are also working on our piece of the newsletter. The district is going to have a newsletter coming out soon, and the Board of Education will have a section in there just to talk to our residents and taxpayers as well. I also wanted to share that 3 of our board members that happen to be our CEC committee members went on a CODA walk, which is co-occurring disorders walk, went on a CODA walk last Friday. That's Trustee Valen, Trustee Thomas, and Trustee Werner. And they went along, of course, our superintendent was there as well, a few staff members. It was generally from Woodlands, was organized by a senior student of ours, Cindy Jackson, who came to speak to the board at our last regular meeting, and it was an excellent walk from what I understand as well. There were several elected officials there that walked along with you. So I want to thank you, board members, for going and representing the board and for participating with our students and advocating for co-occurring substance abuse and mental health disorders. Lastly, I just want to thank our community, specifically our neighbors, for being patient with us while we make decisions to keep our students as safe as possible during the day. And so I just want to thank you guys for your patience. A wise person said to me that very often adults are made a little bit uncomfortable when we have to make safety decisions for our children and our students. So I just want to thank you for the little bit of uncomfortability in the middle of the day with regard to our campus and safety for our students. And that is all. Our next item on the agenda is Dr. Iverson's Superintendent Report.
So I will begin with piggybacking on what Trustee Mayers just concluded with what we're doing during the middle of the day. The most important factor to a superintendent when making decisions that have a tangible impact on the district is what's best for kids. And we had an immediate need. Our seniors, our high schoolers, middle and high schoolers, we started seeing a lot of traffic in our buildings during the hours of 10:15 to 1:15, the 3-hour span of lunch at the high school, where food is just being dropped off by random people. Our students are using the apps on their phones, and they're ordering food from Uber Eats, all of those apps. And we're just seeing this traffic. As I'm roaming the building, the high school, we have doors propped in the back, just left open, or where kids are running because they see us and food is coming in. And so it presented an immediate need and a danger to shut down. We have a closed campus. Our students cannot leave campus to go get food, but they're having food brought in. So the need was to protect the students, to keep the environment safe. And what Mr. Smith did a lot to send home notices to the parents, talk to the students. And so we have just shut it down for that period of time temporarily. So we know that that became an inconvenience to some of our community members. We are very sorry for that. The intent was not to inconvenience them, but to send a message to our students that we are serious about them not ordering food on campus, and more importantly, to keep them safe. That is my responsibility, my first responsibility as superintendent, to the district and to the parents and to every student here. But with that said, it is temporary. We're watching it. And as it gets better, which I've seen a tremendous improvement, it won't be forever. The students are getting the message that we mean business. You cannot have food delivered here. And those who had food delivered and those drivers could not get on campus, they lost that money. They didn't get the food. So that's getting to our students, and it's better. So we won't keep it. We'll eliminate it, as soon as we can. I want to be sure I explain, though, during that period of time, the gate is not completely shut. We repositioned a security officer there to just monitor the traffic, and he stopped cars as they were coming in and checked for food, and of course they could not get by. One side of the gate remained open, so there was always accessibility for if we had a fire or police had to get on campus, they could get there. The gate, there was someone there who could just open the other side. So it wasn't shut down in the true sense of how it sounds. It was just a way to try to monitor that traffic. I did talk to the police chief, and he and I are talking to the Association of Stone Oak, the representative who's the association member there, to assure them what's happening and why we're doing it and to solicit their support. So I wanted to have an opportunity to talk to that tonight because I know that was an inconvenience to our residents, but that was not the intent. The intent, again, was to make an immediate decision to keep our students safe. Second, I want to talk about the Mira Miscover testing update. Trustee Thomas mentioned a little bit about it that I shared at the CEC meeting, and we've made tremendous progress since the last board meeting. We have planned to start testing Monday, October the 18th, to give us time to get the motions and the agreements approved by our board. We're backpedaling, and we'll be ready to start that testing on Monday. We met with Mira today, and they are ready to start dropping off the kits. Once approved, so what will be going out as soon as they're approved by our board are the consent forms to our parents. Any parent can consent to have their child tested weekly, but no child will be tested without a consent form filed here at the school. So when we start that process after, hopefully Wednesday, start sending out the consent forms to parents, we'll give them a week to get those back to us, which will take us to October 12th, so that we can then start planning the distribution, the drop-off, so that on the 18th, we're ready to do that. The testing, the students are not required to be tested. It is voluntary. There's no cost, as I said before. And when they get the consent form, parents will have embedded in the link an FAQ to answer many of those questions. It is a Pcr Saliva Test, and it is self-administered. So the kits will come pre-packaged with labels with the names of the students whose parents and teachers. Anybody can take this test, faculty, staff, students. The testing kits come pre-labeled with the name of the person. So on the day of testing, it goes to each site. We send the list of people to be tested Friday. They come that following Monday. People show up, get the kit. They take it home. It is self-administered. They have 24 hours to take it home and just perform the test, seal it up, bring it back, drop it off in where we will designate in the school. Mira comes back and pick it up. Originally, they were going to come on campus and do that. This process, since we started, has evolved to now they're self-administered, they're self-packaged with labels on it, and every week, students and parents, students, teachers, and all report to their building, to the site, possibly the nurse's office, pick up their test, take it home, take the test, bring it back, drop it back there. Then all Mira picks them up, takes them to the lab, and they send to me a report. I only will get the names of those persons who tested positive. And from that point, as a district, we do what we're doing now. We start the contact tracing, and we do what we do, and contacting all those persons who had contact or came into proximity with the person who was tested positive. So it sounds, it's going very well. Right now, we just finished our mandatory, as you heard Trustee Thomas talk about, we just finished our mandatory faculty survey, where all faculty district staff completed a survey and submitted to us their vaccination card. Those who did not are part of the unvaccinated and will be required to do the weekly testing once we start on the 18th. So we know who they are. They will be contacted and told that the testing starts, and they're expected to do that. Staff does not have to use this testing. But they must get tested. So if you decide not to use the testing with Mira, you still must get tested on your own. Mira, the consent form is just to give Mira permission to give you a test. My last thing I want to talk about is my parent voice session. You know, I'm still in the process of gathering data and visiting schools. I just had one last night at Highview. I will be here at Woodlands Middle High School next Wednesday on the 13th from 6 to 7. That is a virtual meeting. And as I explained early on, all of this data is going to be used to form the foundation of our strategic plan. And as part of that work, I am having here, as part of my report, I would like to ask Mr. Ed McCormick to come to the mic. I'm recommending and having him come back to the board to talk more about his role in helping to solidify and begin that process of our strategic plan. Once my piece of this work, the phase 1 of collecting this data from these sessions I'm doing one-on-one and in groups, that will be handed off to Mr. McCormick if approved by the board, to begin to do the work around our focus areas, fleshing it out with goals, objectives, timelines, and measurable objectives. So he heads back to clarify what that connection will be as we work together. Mr. McCormick, I introduce you to the Board of Trustees.
Superintendent Iverson, thank you for the invitation. Board, thank you for agreeing to meet with me one more time. Let me start with a quick apology, and I want to make sure that I answer all of your questions as we move through this. The last time that I spoke to you, time was short, and I tried to cram a lot of information into the presentation. So I want to, I understand a couple of questions, specifically one question that I need to address about overlap, and I will do that. And if that's insufficient, just ask me again to elaborate on the explanation that I gave. I also did not tell you that in the spirit of true confessions that I'm a longtime board member. I've probably spent more time at a board table than the 7 of you put together. I've been on the Arlington board for 35 years. And I've been on the BOCES board up until this year for 30 years. So I've spent a lot of time at board meetings. and spent time in New York State as president of New York State School Boards. I also served on the National School Boards Association Board of Directors, as well as chair the Caucus of Black School Board Members, National Caucus of Black School Board Members. So I only tell you that to tell you that the gray hair does mean something. It is an indication that I've been around for a while. I have but notwithstanding. And can you hear me? I'm a bit of a little Irish, I guess, because I move my hands. I use my hands when I'm talking. So if the microphone goes in and out, just raise a hand. There is never in my experience, there's never been an effective school board, a school district, a board of education that did not have a plan. And you're taking this step tonight and are to move forward based on whatever your timeline is. To put into place that plan, a plan. A strategic plan is certainly extremely important, and the proposal that I have prepared for you comes in 4 phases. The first of it is the first phase, and this phase that I love the most is the engagement phase, which involves community and staff, superintendent, discussions with the board, and we go through a number of issues. Also, that will be supplemented by a survey, online survey, and we will devise that based on consultation with the board. We will also review all of the school data, and as Dr. Iverson said, an important part of that first phase, that engagement phase, will be the information that she has provided or will provide as a result of her meetings. The question was, and let me finish the overview and I'll come back to the question, because the question was, is there overlap between a 100-day plan and a strategic plan? And I want to answer that, but let me just take you through the other 3 phases very quickly. The next phase after that first phase is that we will ask you to put together a committee of your peers from within the community, from within the school district, community at large. And we'll take that data that I will go through and aggregate and synthesize and bring it to the committee in a format for them to develop the formal documented strategic plan. That strategic plan will include a confirmation of the mission. It will focus on what I believe is a key component of the plan, the vision of the district. And remember that word, vision, because the vision will be what you want to be 3 to 5 years from now. We talk about mission, but mission is the reason you come to work every day. The vision is what you want to be 5 years down the road. So there's a distinct difference, and a lot of emphasis will be placed on the vision of the district, what your community wants, and we will certainly focus on that as we move through the process. The other phase, the next phase, is one of implementation. And we didn't do this the last time 5, 6 years ago. Didn't put a formal implementation plan in place. But that's part of the proposal, the total proposal of who's going to do what to whom, when will it be done, how it will be done, and who will be responsible for getting it done within the framework of the superintendency. So the implementation piece of it becomes extremely important. The last phase is we want to put together a way to measure the process. Whatever you say is important, what will be the metrics that will allow us to measure progress towards the final goal over that 3 to 5 year period? It is there'll be tactical pieces, of course, that you will put in each year, and be measurable pieces, but it also will allow the board and the community to have that visibility to the progress that you're making over time. Also allow the opportunity for the community to stay in sync with the direction of the district. And most importantly, it will allow the board to stay in sync with its own plan. So that is so those 4 phases is the proposal and the manner in which we will move forward. It will take us, typically, you would do this in about 4 to 6 months. We put it over because we were combining all 4 phases together. It will probably take until into the summer of next year, 2022, with the idea that it will be in place and usable come September of next year. The dashboard piece may not be complete. We'll work on it during the summer and start exercising and using it and refining it through 22, 23. Once we finish that, I'm not done. We'll come back and have periodic meetings and work with the team in terms of identifying those metrics, those items that need to be visible on the dashboard that will give you a quick update of where you are and be able to do that in a timely manner and in a manner which constructive. What are those things that you need to identify to ensure or measure the progress of the district? You can have, some people think you have to have 50 measurables, but I worked for a little manufacturing company down the road, and we had about $1 billion business, billions, and you had 3 or 4 things that indicated whether you were going to have success or not for that quarter. We can do much of the same thing. Question on overlap. There is only overlap that you really have when you talk about the 100-day plan. And I read Dr. Iverson's 100-day plan, and I think it's a great document, quite frankly. And I think the timing is exactly right in terms of where we're going and where you want to go relative to a strategic plan. You talked about short-term goals and long-term goals. So the first piece of it, timing is good, because now you have a reconfirmation of the base year, and that's this year. The strategic plan will start 2022, but here's what's important. The 100-day plan, some districts use 6 months, some use 12 months. But basically, it is a tactical plan. It puts together the rationale that Dr. Iverson will use for the transition from the old regime to the new regime, whatever that is. And that becomes very important. She will use that to look at capacity, look at alignment of resources, create relationships with people that don't know her, with ones that she does not know. It will allow her to get to know the community. It is a tactical plan dedicated to having a smooth transition for the first year. It also creates an opportunity to ensure that the board and the superintendent are on the same page. The things that I've seen greatest failures that you look out 12 months from now, you start to do the evaluation, and all of a sudden one party or the other didn't realize that that was a priority. So having the 100-day plan makes a lot of sense, and it is a management tool. The pieces, as those 4 phases that I outlined for you, at the beginning of those phases is heavily orchestrated by the board. Strategic plan is a governance tool. The 100-day plan is a management tool. Now, this cooperation, we're going to talk to some of the same people, but we ask the questions a little bit different. For instance, she will ask, what are the challenges? And she will want to know what the challenges are today. What will she have to focus on today? I'll ask the same question. I want to know what those challenges are as you look out over 3 to 5 years. And we will come back and synchronize the responses that you got from the base year with the ones that are included in the strategic years, in the out years. It becomes very important. The third leg of that triangulation will, if you saw that term, will be the online survey. And we will get the same questions or questions like that response, and we'll put all of that data together and make sure it makes sense, and that we're getting a true measure of what the public thinks, what the board believes is, so that the board can make intelligent decisions on from relevant data. So that is the first part of it. So the timing makes sense. The second part is that we have the content will be different as we go through that. She will focus on a 100-day plan, will focus on capacity, alignment, relationships with the board, relationships with the community. I will focus on the relationships with the community at large across a broader base. And we will level sync that information back to her piece of it. But again, my questions will be about vision, her questions will be about tactical pieces, and we link together those two pieces as we go through the plan. There is so you sort of get an idea as we walk through it and we go through the implementation piece of it, becomes more and more of a superintendent's responsibility. The data that she will look at, we will still have to find that data, the empirical data from the community. So the overlap will be with same people doing some of the same things in terms of focus group, but the emphasis will be different. One will not substitute for the other. If you try to eliminate the 100-day plan and say, well, let's do it in the strategic plan, you're talking about a catastrophe, because you not now the job of the superintendent at this stage becomes the transition, to manage the transition for the new day in the first year in concert with the board. If you said they don't, if you ask the strategic plan people not to use any of that data because we just talked to them or not talk to those folks, then you're short-circuiting your community, because not everybody's in there with the online surveys and the focus of our questions will be different, and I think you will give them an opportunity for them to talk about specifically the future of the organization as you look out over that 3 to 5 year horizon. It is hopefully that makes sense, and I didn't confuse it more. I'm an old Georgia boy, so I'm prone to at times make things more confusing than they need be.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. McCormick. Are there any trustees with additional questions? I see Trustee Werner's hand shot up. Anyone else? Okay, Trustee Werner.
What kind of, do we get a report on phase one? That is, when you completed phase one, do you share that with us in some way?
Absolutely. What I will do I will take the information out of phase one. I'll summarize it as to themes, direction, things that we're hearing, things that that may be still open, may be problematic, things that and I share everything, David. Some people don't say something bad about you. I share that. I do not try to augment the data with my own personal opinion. I just try to put it in a concise format so that the board can interpret it in an intelligent way.
So you're going to report to us oral, you're also going to give us a written report?
Both.
Good.
Both. Because that report that I give you, and if you're okay with that, then the committee that we ask for is a strategic team committee. That becomes the foundation for the strategic team to come in and start to formalize the strategic document.
Thank you.
Any other trustees with questions or concerns? We do have Mr. McCormick's contract on our agenda for consideration. It's recommended by the superintendent for our next meeting. So, Mr. McCormick, the board may discuss, I guess, if there are any closed session inquiries, we would discuss that then with our legal counsel, but I don't hear any questions coming your way additionally tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. As I said, it's a lot here to get excited about, and I look forward to working with you. And I certainly hope that we can conclude all the details of contract and get down to the real work of extending the lifeline of Greenberg to all of its citizenry. And if you have questions, give me a call. I'm always available. And have a great evening.
Thank you so much. Okay, trustees, I'm going to move on to our next agenda item, which is number A9, and that's our Assistant Superintendent for Business report.
Tracy, I'm sorry, I just had one
Oh,
quick.
yes?
I just had one quick question for Dr. Iverson regarding Miramis. Did I say that right? Yeah. So you described a process for getting them the swabs, and so how long does it actually take to get a test result?
So once all they're distributed on, say, Monday, they take it home, they bring it back on Tuesday, the Miramis picks them up on Wednesday, 24 hours, they say, we get the results. We get a report generated with the results for all those persons who took the test.
So 24 hours from the time that they
Pick them up.
pick them up. So that's 48 hours from the time that they're, okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
I can just share, I don't know if it's a similar process or or the similar, I guess we'll see, right? But Trustee Dragic and the rest of the board, I know my daughter did a summer program where they did similar thing, where they took home a test and they brought it back the next day. It worked very well. And I think they called that pool testing, because they identified, I think they did several students at once. It wasn't individually, but I guess you're going to get an individual report, you were saying. Or maybe it's a grouping report, but it worked very well. It does sound strange because initially I was like confused about it as well, but it actually worked out very well. The students got they had to use saliva that did spit into a tube. It was kind of gross, but they seal it, they bring it right back, and it worked very well. Okay, any more questions? I'm sorry for the superintendent's report, maybe not McCormick specific. Questions or comments? No? Okay, so we will move on to the Assistant Superintendent for Business report with Ms. Raymond.
Thank you. So for the month of August, we began the month with $29,431,672.40 and made deposits of $1,238,161.39 and dispersed between payroll checks, accounts payable checks, and due to other funds of $3,230,072.48 and ended the month with $27,439,761.31. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Raymond. The next item on our, I'm sorry, are there any questions about the business report or comments from trustees? Seeing none, we're going to move on to A10, which is an anticipated adjournment to executive session, and I'm going to ask for a motion from someone.
I move that we adjourn to executive session to discuss the employment history of particular persons being considered for board action this evening and at the next meeting.
I second.
It's been properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. We're now in exec session. Thank you. Okay, Steve, you there?
Yep, you ready?
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. We are back from executive session. The time is now 10:46, and we're going to return to our agenda. The next items on our agenda are our Section B, which are our instructional personnel items. And prior to reading the approvals, I do need to clarify that we have 3 amendments to tonight's agenda. I apologize in advance. We try not to make amendments, but every once in a while, something comes up. So we have 3 amendments to tonight's agenda. Instructional personnel items B9. Shawana Mann's probationary period should read effective October 18th, 2021, ending October 17th, 2025. Secondly, instructional personnel item B10 should reflect the correct spelling of Leah Servedio, Servedio, and instructional personnel item B14 should reflect the daily rates of the substitute teachers and of teaching assistants as 125 for substitute teachers and 95 for teaching assistants. So, can I get a motion?
I move that we approve the instructional personnel items presented to the board for approval this evening as amended. I'm sorry. Did you want to say it? Second. It's okay.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And we have Section C, non-instructional personnel items. Can I get a motion?
All right, I'll do it.
Do it.
I move that we approve the non-instructional personnel items presented to the board for approval this evening.
I second.
It's been properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Section D.
I
Board-
move that we approve the board action items presented to the board for approval this evening.
I second.
It's been properly moved and second. Any discussion?
Question
Yes?
on item 4, the budget code transfer to fund TRS payment. Is this,
That's just moving from ERS to TRS, that's all.
it's not the initial funding for that account, right? It's
Uh,
moving,
We had to move it from the employee retirement system to the teacher retirement system, so it's staying all within the retirement system, just a different line,
okay,
account code.
thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries. Next, we're going to move on to item number 2, which is new business. Is there any new business for board trustees? I see Trustee Pineda.
So, I've gotten some feedback from our community that when we are in exec session, our video feed basically just buffers. So I'm wondering if it would make sense to put up like a splash screen or something that says, something to the effect of "we will be back," because some folks have basically disconnected from the feed because they thought the meeting was over because it was buffering while we were in exec session. So it's just a suggestion.
Thank you, Trustee Pineda. I see Dr. Iverson writing. I'm sure you'll talk with your technology department and let us know what happens with that. I see Trustee Thomas. Trustee Washington?
Yes, hi. I had some feedback from some of our community members in reference to the football coach here at Woodlands High School. I'm just going to ask Dr. Iverson if she could speak to the athletic director. I'm hearing that some of the behavior might not be as appropriate or as we would be here at Woodlands High School. There were some things that were said to a parent. Example, I only care about the students that are really on the football team, not your son. That's an example that actually came to me. And then I spoke to some family members. A lot of our students have been cut from the team due to the fact that they've missed some of the practices. But, you know, we're in a pandemic and we don't know what's going on in people's homes. So if you could just speak to the athletic director about that.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Washington. And, is there any other new business by the board? Trustee Valen?
Sorry, maybe I need to figure out how work sessions work. I do have questions or comments on the items that we're reviewing for next week's meeting, Section E. I just didn't know if we skipped that or if we're
Thank
going
you
back
for
to
saying
it.
that. When we were finished, I was going to say, and I have to go back to Section
Okay.
E. You know, I go through the approval section, so that E is actually not printed here, so that's my fault for not going back. So is there any other new business item, just since we're on that item?
Sure.
Yes?
So I just wanted to remind everyone that there is an Education and Wellness Committee meeting tomorrow at 6 p.m. and it's posted on our calendar, and you can pre-register for the meeting.
Wonderful, thank you. Hearing no other trustees, I did want to remind everyone that we have our retreat before our next board meeting. It's scheduled for Saturday, October 16th, from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. That is a 3-hour retreat. We are going to have our first 2 hours facilitated by Dr. Harold Coles, and that's going to be working on board and superintendent relationship, board functioning. I've spent quite a bit of time talking with Dr. Coles. If you recall, Dr. Coles also used to work in the district. He's worked with previous administration here in the district. He's also the superintendent of the entire Southern Westchester BOCES. So looking forward to him coming from 10 to 12 here at the high school. That will not be open to the public. Then from 12 to 1, we will open things up to the public and have a discussion regarding our Board of Education goals for the year. And that will actually be facilitated and we'll be working with Dr. Iverson, our very own superintendent. So everyone look forward to that, and I want to remind you that. And that will also kick off that next week, which is Board of Education Trustee Appreciation Week. So I just want to bring that up as well, and we will have our regular meeting that Tuesday, the 19th. Okay, great, wonderful. And so now, as Trustee Valen indicated, and while my district clerk reminded me, I should go back to Section E. So I apologize for that. So if everyone can turn back to Section E, we have to review the agenda items for our next meeting. And are there any questions or comments about these agenda items? Trustee Valen.
Do you want me? Yes, I have a couple. One is item E2. I took a look at the report that will be presented for approval, and I just had a question about the section stakeholder participation. It says that this plan needs to be developed in consultation with parents, school staff, and others in accordance with the Commissioner's regulations, and I'm just seeing that the team members listed do not include any parents. I was wondering if that's an oversight or if we would be reaching out to parents for inclusion on this stakeholder team, or if COVID is presenting obstacles to that.
COVID did present some obstacles to that. There's a history to this DCIP. It's called the District Comprehensive Improvement Plan. We are trying to catch up and submit this because we get $50,000, isn't it right, Lisa, if we submit it? The district had not submitted one, so Jill Post took this on, and the focus and the priorities that we did list for some of the areas in special education we want to work on. So I can check with her to see if her committee did invite and include some parents. I don't have an answer to that right now, but and if so, see what we can do before.
To include some possibly, okay,
Or at least to share it with the community.
okay, thank you. Should I go on?
Thank you, trustee Valen. Is anyone, any other trustees? I know you have.
I have other items, but I don't know if
Another
you're gonna go
item.
one
So
by
any other
one.
trustees on this item? Let's go down one by one, just so that we cover everything. Any questions, comments on the treasurer's report? On the warrant report? Yes, trustee Valen?
Yes, sorry. There's two items I wanted to ask about. If we could get answers before next meeting, that would be great. The first is check number 236743.
Which month are you in, trustee Valen?
Sorry, the warrant report for August. It's check number 236743 dated August 13th, 2021 to Total Concussion Management. It says it's a subscription to Easy Screen, and I thought that's a software we're not currently using this school year. So I'm wondering if we have parts of our school or athletics perhaps that are using that program, and that's why we're paying for a subscription, or if this is an oversight. So
Ms. Raymond,
I'll
would you-
have to look into them and get back to
Okay.
you.
before the next meeting, thank you. And the other check number I had a question about was 236657. 236657. Let me make sure I have it right. And it's related to charges from 2019-20. I just wanted to be sure we really are paying something from that long ago, or if this is an
Who's it
error in
made out to?
notation.
Who's it made out to?
Bedford, 236657. Let me verify. It's Bedford. I might have the check number wrong. I'll verify and email you if the check number I've named is different. I wrote down 236657, but I do not see it here, so I'll email the correct check number.
It's made out to Bedford School?
Yes. And it referenced student services for 2019-2020.
Yes,
School
and
year.
if you remember what Jill Post said, we do get billed for prior years, and that's a big problem in the special ed world, because we can get if the state readjusts or adjusts their rate setting, they could either owe us money or we would have to pay additional money, and they can go all the way back, that we are in 21, 22, so they could go back to 18, 19 and forward, and we would owe money.
Okay, so there is a time limit, a
Yes,
finite
there
time
is.
limit. So
Yep.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Thank you. And it was asked of me by the members of the public, and I know it's come up before, but maybe we can just clarify on camera for this. With taking a new administration, we have a new superintendent, we have a newer business official, even though you started for us interim last year. Thank you for that. Should there be some sort of a audit of the way that things, although we have the usual audit, should there be a special or additional or a forensic audit, which was what I was actually asked, when a new administration like this takes over the district?
That's not a practice that I am used to or that I have experienced in the past, but I would assume that that would be a board decision if you wanted to spend the money for that. I'd have to find out how much that would cost because it wasn't budgeted for. And if you remember, you had the internal auditor do 2 different audits, and we had to find the money for that. So if that's what you want, then I'd have to find out how much it would cost, and then we'd have to figure out where we're getting the money from.
Okay, thank you. So for clarity, it's not a usual process that's done,
Correct.
even with?
Correct.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
And I can tell you, just personally, in my own, because I've been doing this, for 25 years, I kind of do my own audit. I like to see what's happened, ask a lot of questions, look at different things, analyze different accounts, things like that. I mean, it's not a full-blown forensic audit, but I like to know what the processes are, who's got their hands where, and again, to make sure that internal controls are being followed, things like that, so.
Okay, great, thank you. The next item is E5 curriculum contract. Any trustee questions? E6, Curriculum Contract, Music Conservatory of Westchester, Strings Instruction. E7, Curriculum Contract, UPK Child Care Centers. I did have a question, I know I posed to the, in the board packet about our UPK grant and Head Start grant, and funding, and I'm just, wanting to follow up on that's still happening.
Yes, we still get the UPK grant from New York State. We get an ECP grant, and we do get the Head Start grant. It's not with Westcop this year. They lost the contract. It's with another organization, and we have been in contact with them and working with them to get all the paperwork done and submitted.
Okay, so the paperwork's not done yet?
No, we're working with the organization, yes, yeah.
Okay, I see Trustee Washington's hand.
Yes, I have a question in reference to the Music Conservatory. Will this be in person? Is this virtual? And are the employees going to be vaccinated? Because they're going into the school. So if you don't have the answer now, Dr. Iverson, you can get back to me, but I would like to know how they're going to basically educate our students with violence. Will it be in person, remote, and will the staff members be vaccinated?
Okay, thank you for that question, Trustee Washington. We're going to move forward to E8, Westchester County contract. E9, if I go too fast, please interrupt me. E9, McCormick Consulting Services. E10, Never Alone. And E11, PPS contract, Elmsford UFSD. So seeing no trustee inquiries, we're going to return to our F closing items. F2 for new business. Is there any other new business items listed? No? So I did receive a couple of inquiries from community parents, regarding remote learning. I did talk to the superintendent about that. There are some parents who had some concerns about synchronous versus asynchronous learning when their student or their child is home quarantined. So any students unvaccinated or too young to be vaccinated may need to quarantine for, I believe, 10 days, Dr. Iverson. And what I understand happens is that they receive work to do while they're at home. Some families have expressed concern that the work is asynchronous, meaning posted or given for you to do at home on your own, as opposed to live teaching on the remote Chromebook. Can you talk about that a little bit? I know you've explained it in the very beginning of the year, but I don't know if you can address that again now, because we're getting a few cases come up in the school district as expected, and so kids are now quarantining and having this concern.
So yes, there are two ways that we're offering a form of remote learning during the quarantine period. Individual cases, those students who are home, unfortunately, while being quarantined, will receive asynchronous instruction, where these are assignments that the teacher will upload or download through the Google platform for the student to work on. But the assignments are connected to the instruction and where what they're learning at that time, but it is not live instruction. In cases where we have a full class or a volume of students who need to quarantine, including the teacher, and the teacher is home, then that group of students, the whole class home and teacher home, that's when remote instruction will happen. Teachers teaching the students from home remotely while the students are home. And so those are the only two scenarios that we're doing remote according to our reopening plan that we discussed in September. That is what should be happening. Now, while those students are home, getting the download of assignments, we have a TA who should be checking, and I can confirm that and make sure that's happening. But in our plan, we committed that someone is checking in, though, with those students. to see if they have questions and to do around the assignments. Then it's asynchronous, it's not live instruction, but they do have some contact with the live person to see if they have questions around the assignments. In cases where they're all home and teachers home, teachers instructing them live like they did last year, so they can ask their teacher directly those questions.
Thank you, Dr. Iverson, for going through that again. I see your hand. Trustee Washington?
So Dr. Iverson, as you are speaking with your administration and maybe with the UFT president, not the UFT, the GTF president, is there a way that we can pay teachers per session so that they maybe after school, they can link on with the student that's doing the asynchronous work? So at least they have a certified teacher checking in, seeing if there are any type of answers or questions that the student needs, especially if you're quarantined for 10 days. You know, that's something you can look into, but, you know, as a trustee, a mother, an educator, I do believe that students, just because they get COVID, they should have a teacher to at least be there to support that academic process. So, and progress, I should say. So if that's a way that maybe some teachers would do an hour, if they decide to do their prep, you know, we pay them for their prep, or if it's after school, they just touch base with that child. It could be 3 times a week. I mean, whatever can, you know, whatever we can afford. But I would like an instructor to be able to meet with the students that are quarantined for 10 days.
I will check to see if there are some who will, from my understanding, to see if there's some teachers who are willing to work after school or during the day, during their, say, prep or lunch, at the cost that we would pay them to touch base with. I can
It might
check
even
on
be
that.
that child's teacher, or, you know.
Yes.
Right.
Know that the TAs do communicate back with the teachers, though, because they're what they're checking on with the students is what the teacher has told them to do. So that they are in touch with the teacher to give that kind of feedback, but I will check.
Okay, thank you.
If that's something the board wants me to do, we will definitely do that. And pay them, I forget, Ivy, what is the stipend they would get?
It would be like
Or the hourly rate?
contractual after-school thing.
I think the contractual rate is 47.
47.
Thank you for clarity on that. Thank you, Ms. Washington. Okay, any other, yes, Trustee
Just for a
Valen?
point of clarity, would we need to approve that payment ahead of time as we do for, thank you.
So yes, we would need to approve that. It would need to be, she's going to look into it, but it would need to be a recommendation from the superintendent. We would need to look at that and approve that information. It doesn't just like, you know, nothing happens instantly, right? We have to still look at it and approve it, et cetera. Okay, any additional questions or feedback? Because we're going to move to adjournment next. That's great. Okay, last item on the agenda, F3. Adjournment, can I have a motion, please?
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
And I second.
It's been properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries. Meeting adjourned, 11:09 PM.